CD 7. Chapter 39. As chunks of the demolished phone crashed to the floor, Jack stood perfectly still, his eyes glued to Charlotte. A weird look on his face. His eyes were glazed over, as if he was affected by something. Charlotte had seen that look before, many times, but never on Jack. It was not a good sign, at all. The home phone began ringing, but neither of them moved. "Look, Jack, I don't know what's going on here, but it's clearly a mix-up and—"
"Shut the fuck up!"
he yelled, his face contorted with anger.
"You shut your fucking mouth! That idiot Willard has fucked up everything! Fuck!
He was pacing now, his body in overdrive. He kicked out at the coffee table, causing it and everything on it to sprawl across the rug. Charlotte jumped at the outburst. She needed to calm him down, and fast. "Listen, we need to talk about this," she said, as the phone began ringing again. She had to get a conversation going with him before things really got out of hand. "I don't know how much you're involved in this, but I can help you get through it. Joe is my brother. Jack, I don't know what happened, but I'm sure there's some sort of explanation. There's no need to make things any worse than they already are." Jack laughed at the shallowness of her words.
"Get through it?"
he mocked, circling the couch.
"Some sort of explanation? Yeah, right. The explanation is that your brother is one twisted pervert, so get that into your head. For once in your boring do-gooder life, you have no idea what's going on, okay? No fucking idea."
He was right, and she knew it. Was Jack, her Jack, the man who had been such a rock for her these last few weeks, really responsible for the murder of those 3 innocent women and the assault on her brother? Could she really have been so blind? First Joseph, then J.D., and now Jack. What type of curse is this? Charlotte prayed that J.D. would look past his anger at her and be on his way to her house right now. The home phone began ringing for the 3rd time, and, as if a light globe had appeared above his head, she knew Jack had realized the predicament he was in. He stormed off into the kitchen. Charlotte was still on the couch, her energy levels sapped. She would do what she had to do to survive, but right now, just staying awake and not vomiting was difficult enough, let alone dealing with this man who was unraveling before her eyes. Jack re-emerged from the kitchen, a large silver knife clutched in his trembling hand, knuckles fit to burst.
"Get the fuck up,"
he snarled, standing above her and beckoning at her face with the knife.
"I don't give a fuck how sick you are. You're the only chance I've got of getting out of this shit, so it's time to walk."
"I'm not going anywhere," Charlotte said defiantly. If she left this house, things would go downhill fast. "I haven't got the strength, Jack. Please, can we just—" He swung his right hand across his body in a classic backhand down-the-line motion and slapped her across the cheek. Her face recoiled from the blow as her head rebounded onto the cushion. Pain echoed through her head, her skin burning, the metallic taste of blood flooding her mouth. Charlotte winced, but she couldn't let Jack know how much he had hurt her.
"You will do exactly as I say,"
he spat, his face only inches from hers.
"If you don't want to be number 4, you better cut the crap."
He grabbed the blanket off her and flung it away like a magician revealing an empty cage. It floated to the floor majestically, the calm before the storm. Clutching her arm, he yanked at her, trying to get her onto her feet. Charlotte struggled against him, not only because she needed to stall him in any way she could, but also because she was in no shape to move quickly. Her head was spinning, the nausea convincing her body she was roiling on a tinny in the middle of Bass Strait with a bellyful of milk. In her desperation, she struck out, her hands raking at Jack's face but falling short, her frantic fingers only managing to clutch onto his scarf, which unravelled from around his neck. "What the hell?" Charlotte was thrown by the deep purple discoloration that ran below Jack's jawline, almost to the curve of his ear. That bruise, that exact bruise. She had unfortunately seen too many times before. "Jack, I—" Face flushed with anger and embarrassment, Jack cut her short and lashed out again, grabbing her by the hair and pulling upwards. Charlotte had no time to react, to secure her wig. Feeling the cap that held it all in place rip from her skull, she braced herself. Time stood still as Jack continued to pull, her hair coming away in his hand, resistance broken. The entire wig tore clean away from Charlotte's shaven head, leaving her sitting there, exposed, more naked than she had ever been in her entire life. She fought the urge, but couldn't stop the tears falling from her eyes, dribbling down her cheeks. Charlotte felt shame now turn her face crimson. Like Jack, and perhaps like Joseph, she too had been leading a life of lies, fooling the people closest to her. Now, in this maelstrom of emotions that was taking over both of their lives, she had suddenly and unexpectedly been exposed for the fraud she had become. Jack was clearly shocked. The anger in his face subsided momentarily, replaced by disbelief as he stood above her, the mop of red hair hanging in his grasp. He stared at her, perhaps only now really seeing her for the first time. "What the fuck?" He stumbled over the words, staring at her in confusion. Charlotte stared boldly back, her emotions bare on her tear-stained face. There was a break in the storm, a moment of clarity and calmness, an awareness of things bigger than either of them had imagined until that very moment. "I'm sick," Charlotte said, her fingers playing with the edge of the blanket. It seemed impossible that she could be nervous right now. She hadn't had to do this with anyone yet, not her friends, colleagues, or family. She was on unknown ground. "You've probably guessed it's a bit more serious than the flu." Jack was clearly torn between showing her some empathy and dealing with the situation he had found himself in. The clock was ticking. "What is it?" he said. "Cancer?" She nodded, the strength of the word being said by someone she actually cared about a punch to her gut. "How bad?" he asked, his tender side seeping through. "Bad," she replied. At the moment, the cancer was least of her worries, but if it meant she could bide a little more time, she would use it any way she could. "Come on, JD, where are you?" Jack exhaled, and she could see his moral compass spinning wildly out of control. She watched him, searching for any opportunity to take him down, which in her condition would be difficult, but she would do it in a heartbeat. He stared at the wig hanging loosely in his hand. Then he placed it back on her head, roughly and askew, the auburn locks covering half her face. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, shaking his head. "But I'm in this too deep now. I have no option. This thing is bigger than you or me. We have to go now. Get up, please. I'll be as accommodating as I can, but you know what I'm capable of, Charlotte. I'll do what I have to do to achieve what I want." She nodded, knowing his words were true. If he had killed all those people, then he would surely have no qualms about slicing her throat and leaving her on the lounge room floor to bleed out. There was a brief standoff as Charlotte considered her options. Then she stood, tentatively getting to her feet, wobbling like a 95-year-old woman on stilts. "You're sick, Jack. You know that, don't you? I know what that bruise on your neck means. You need help. Real help, before it's too late. We can get that for you. I can get that for you." He stared right through her. "We're well past that, Charlotte. Now walk." Charlotte shuffled forward, Jack's hand in the middle of her back, guiding her and shoving her at the same time. He kept the knife extended in his other hand, far enough away from her that even if she tried to grab it, he would have ample time to react. Passing the dining table, Charlotte saw her jigsaw puzzle almost complete. Hours of work had been put into its construction, calm, soothing hours that had allowed her to recuperate both mentally and physically, giving her time out when she'd needed it most. Time that she had cherished. Time that had allowed her to come to a better understanding of what a work-life balance really meant, a concept that had been foreign to her until recently. Only in sickness and staring into the face of her mortality, had she realized just how much of her existence had been forfeited to work. Her dedication to serving her community had stolen from her the precious things that life was really about. The stolen kiss from a stranger, the smell of freshly cut grass, the beauty of a sunset on a warm evening, the blossom of love. The necessity to share the sparkle of life with another person, someone you truly connected with. All these things and so much more had been so scarce in Charlotte's world, which had become a messy bundle of deadlines, arrests, statistics, and reputations. What a pity it had only dawned on her now, when her life was in the hands of a suicidal, homicidal maniac. Jack saw her looking at the table and swept his hand across it, puzzle pieces cascading to the floor. Charlotte watched them fall, almost brought to tears.
"Waste of fucking time anyway,"
Jack said, propelling her forward. They crept out to his vehicle, a flash-looking black Mercedes sedan. He pushed her against the side panel and held her while he reached inside and grabbed a bag from the front seat.
"Arms behind your back, now,"
Jack said, the knife still pointed in her direction. Charlotte did as she was told. All the while, her eyes trained on the street, hoping against hope to see a pair of headlights sweeping around the bend. She knew better than to fight against him at the moment. Unless the opportunity arose, she made a pact with herself to sit tight and hopefully ride it out. The cancer revelation had softened Jack somewhat. He was a monster. But was he that much of a monster, that he could do to her what he had done to those other girls? He bound her wrists with thick electrical tape.
"Play up, and I'll tape your mouth too, understand?"
Charlotte nodded, relieved he had shown at least a little mercy. It was a start. He grabbed her arm and shoved her into the back seat, laying her down on her back, her legs barely fitting in when he closed the door. The gravel crunched as he walked around the vehicle and got into the driver's seat. Then the engine started up with a roar. "Where are we going?" she asked, staring at the roof of the vehicle, the night sky visible through the windows.
"To pay your brother a visit," Jack replied. "I think it's about time we had a little chat out of the confessional. Who better to bear witness to that little exchange than you? Oh, and I nearly forgot. There's something else you and your brother need to see there, too."
Jack floored it, screeching out of her driveway and leaving her house behind. They turned left at the end of her street, heading towards the town centre. A car passed them, its headlights briefly illuminating the interior of Jack's vehicle. And all Charlotte could do was wonder whether or not it was J.D., and whether her only chance at survival had just disappeared into the darkness behind her. Chapter 40. J.D. swung into Charlotte's street, his eyes darting, trying to make out shapes in the darkness. Something was wrong, he was sure of it. He had tried her mobile a heap of times after the call had been cut off and got no response, which was unlike her. She hadn't answered her home phone either, and as he pulled into her driveway, he could see her front door was open, the light from inside spilling out. Uh-oh. He strode towards the door, ready for anything. Something wasn't right about this whole situation. His gut instinct was screaming at him that Charlotte was in trouble, but how badly remained to be seen.
"Hello?"
he said, sticking his head in the doorway.
"Charlotte? It's J.D. Are you there?"
His voice echoed through the house. No response. Stepping into the lounge room, his pulse quickened. There was no way Charlotte would have left the house like this. Coffee table on its side, magazines and drink coasters strewn across the polished floor. Looking around, he saw the remains of her mobile phone, shattered in pieces on the floor. What the hell? He did a quick search of the house, each empty room leaving him more and more sickened. Grabbing his mobile, he was about to ring Dash when the phone sprang to life, buzzing in his hand. His boss had beaten him to it, but how? He answered.
"Boss, it's J.D. I'm at Charlotte's. It's—" "Save it for someone who cares, Darkin," Dash said. "We've got another body. Grab Charlotte. We need you both right now." But, boss, Are you hearing me or not? That prick Callahan has done it again. This time he's left her on the steps of the church. Get down there now. We haven't got anyone on the scene yet. It's only just been called in. Uniforms on their way.
JD was stunned. Another body?
Did you hear me, Darkin? Yeah, but listen, boss, I've got a bit of a situation myself. I'm at Charlotte's. I was talking to her earlier, and her phone suddenly went dead. Then she wasn't answering, which I thought was odd. Anyway, I came around here and, well, she's not here. Her place is a mess, and the front door was open when I got here. Looks like there's been some kind of struggle. Her mobile phone's been smashed. I'm worried she's been kidnapped. Fuck me, Dash cursed angrily. That's all we bloody need. Look, you get to this thing at the church. You can't do anything for Charlotte standing there scratching your nuts. I'll put a Kaloff out on her vehicle just in case and get a van around there as soon as I can to canvass the neighbours and see if anyone heard anything. Leave it with me. She's probably just gone for a walk or something. Let me know what the go is when you get to the church. Fuck me, this town's turned to shit.
He hung up. JD stared down at the phone in his hand. He had no alternative. Dash was right. Standing here like a stale bottle of piss was helping no one. He returned to his car, looking back at Charlotte's house one more time. Things weren't right between them. There was no denying that. But he had been her partner for years now, and knew her like the back of his hand. Her accusations had stung, but that could be dealt with later. Right now, she needed him to act. Something about the scene in front of him made the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He didn't like it one bit. Chapter 41. Charlotte had kept quiet in the back seat of Jack's car, her mind running through every possible scenario she could think of. The frightening thing was, they all ended badly.
And here we are,
Jack said, sliding the car into park with a jolt. Charlotte could see him leaning forward, peering through the windscreen at something in front of them. Then he flopped back into his seat and laughed.
It couldn't be more perfect.
He released his seatbelt and climbed out the driver's door. As he did so, Charlotte heard a distant voice raised with authority, yelling something. Was that Joseph? Jack reached in and grabbed Charlotte, sitting her up and sliding her off the seat. He forced her onto her feet as a muffled reply came back. In the semi-darkness of the car park, it took Charlotte a few seconds to acclimatize to being upright again, take in her surroundings, and comprehend the scene in front of her. They were parked at the front of the church, where 8 or 9 long concrete steps led up to the large and ornate doorway. Just inside the entry, Joseph was standing in a dressing gown and slippers. A small bulb glowed from the architecture above his head, shedding enough light for her to see that he had blood smeared on his hands. Then his eyes fell on her, and bewilderment spread across his lined face. "Charlotte, what's going on?"
"We've come to pay you a little visit, Father,"
Jack said, his voice now lower and rasping.
"Remember me?"
Charlotte brought her gaze up until it settled on her brother and, more to the point, the spectacle that surrounded him. Sprawled behind him in the entryway was another female victim, clearly deceased. Revulsion and shock were written across Joseph's face. Even with her years of experience, she was still overwhelmed by it. So she could only imagine what was twisting through Joseph's mind right now. A victim on his doorstep, sirens in the distance, and his sister being held hostage at knife point by a lunatic. There was a glint of recognition in Joseph's eye. "It's you," he said, watching as Jack escorted Charlotte across the distance that separated them, closer and closer. "I don't know what you're doing here, but let her go. She's got nothing to do with whatever this is. It's between you and me."
"Oh, so brave for one so stained,"
Jack said, not bothering to hide his disgust.
"You are correct there, Padre. This is between you and me. But Charlotte here has plenty to do with it as well. Besides, she's my little bargaining chip, and a smart man never lets those go without a fight."
He walked closer, still holding the knife to Charlotte's throat, pressing it in slightly.
Oh, my God. You haven't killed another one, have you, Father? Jack said, his breath close to her ear. What do you think about that, little sis? Maybe I've been telling you a pack of lies. Maybe Joseph really is your man.
Charlotte ignored him, trying to slow her heart rate and remain calm. The electrical tape on her wrists had begun cutting into the flesh it was stuck to, and she grit her teeth. She was on high alert, waiting for any opportunity to make a move, but she knew that Jack held all the cards, at the moment anyway.
You lying prick! Joseph cried. You killed this girl, same as you killed those other girls, and you are going to pay the price for that in this world or the next. All right, of course, Jack replied, nodding his head in false agreement. We all pay for our sins eventually, don't we, Father? You included. But we've got plenty of time to get into that. First, we need to sort out this little situation a bit better. I need you to move away, down towards us. That's the way, he said as Joseph started inching down the stone steps, his eyes not moving from Jack. Now sit down on the last one and don't even think about doing anything stupid or I will slit her throat. You don't want to see Charlotte bleeding out like that poor bitch, do you? Joseph shook his head, his bleary eyes as wide as saucers. Jack and Charlotte, still several meters away from him, began walking up the other side of the steps. Joseph got to the bottom step and sat down. Charlotte was glad he seemed to be staying calm. Now was not the time for heroics. As they reached the top step, she got a better look at the woman, slumped in the corner like a broken marionette. She couldn't help but notice the similarities to the other victims, young, healthy, attractive, left to die. From a distance, she could see 2 white paper rectangles covering the woman's eyes, which, she had no doubt, contained the biblical quote. In that moment, she was certain the killer was Jack, her boyfriend, and not Joseph, her brother. What sort of a fucked-up world was she living in? Jack spun Charlotte around and shoved her down onto the top step. Positioned behind her, he was keeping her under his control while at arm's reach. Now, that's a little better, he said, standing atop the steps like a preacher, his subordinates seated in front and below him. You comfortable, Father? 'Cause we've got a lot of talking to do. Joseph gave a stiff nod and stared out into the near-empty car park. Charlotte knew what he was thinking, because she was thinking the same. Where the hell are the police? As if she had spoken of the devil, there was a screeching of tires and 2 sets of headlights bobbed into the car park. One belonged to a marked police divisional van, the other to an unmarked black sedan. As their headlights lit up the scene, both vehicles slid to a violent stop, and the driver's doors flung open almost simultaneously. Well, looks like the cavalry has arrived, Jack said, increasing the pressure on Charlotte's bound hands as he leant over her, the knife pressed firmly into the side of her neck. Let's see what these heroes want to do. Frozen in position, Jack, Charlotte, and Joseph waited to see how the police would react. The 3 of them, 2 uniformed, 1 not, gathered in front of their vehicles, the headlights silhouetting them. Charlotte recognized J.D. immediately, and her heart leapt. Listen up, J.D. yelled, still 10 or 15 meters away. We need everyone to stay calm, okay? No one has to get hurt here. Jack laughed, a maniacal cackle Charlotte had never heard before, and she was reminded again just how little she knew about the man she thought she loved. Certainly, sir. Whatever you say, Jack yelled back, the pitch of his voice wavering. But what about the dead girl? It's a bit too late for her, isn't it? He laughed again, the only one to see any humour in his words. J.D. took a few steps forward, and Charlotte could see him unlocking the mechanism on his holster, his right hand coming to rest on his firearm, ready to draw it in an instant. Stop right where you are, Jack said suddenly. Charlotte could feel the hand that grasped her wrist was slippery with sweat. Not one step closer, or I start slicing, hero. Get back to the car and give us some room.
JD stopped, his hands held up in an outward display of conciliation.
Relax, mate, relax, he said. We're only here to help, to stop anyone else from getting hurt. Then stay the fuck back. We've got some talking to do,
Jack said.
I can't do that. I need to— Get the fuck back now!
Jack screamed, increasing the pressure of the knife on Charlotte's throat. She winced as she felt a sharp sting and a trickle of blood run down the side of her neck.
Okay.
JD backed off immediately.
Just stay calm. What about Father Joseph? Can he come with me? Not a chance.
Jack's voice had taken on the disgusted tone he used whenever he talked about Joseph.
I'm running the show here, not you. So just get the hell back and let me do what I have to.
JD took a few more steps backward until he hit the bumper bar of his car with his hamstrings.
Right. I've done what you asked,
he yelled.
How about letting the priest go? A sign of good faith, huh? How about you shut up and leave us alone?
Jack yelled. He knelt down behind Charlotte then, maybe to reduce his potential as a target.
There's no such thing as good faith. Anything to do with faith is bad, right, Father?
From her position, Charlotte could see that Joe was still looking about blankly, as if somehow removed from the events that were unfolding around him. A sheen of sweat covered his face, and she could see patches where it had drenched the pyjamas he wore under his dressing gown. Of more concern was the grey pallor of his face, as if he could pass out at any moment. I don't know what you mean, he said softly. I'm just a priest. I only try to help people.
Try to help people?
Jack snapped, his voice rising.
Is that what you call it, you creep? You helped me, all right. Helped me live a fucked up life. Helped me become a monster. That's how you helped me, you worthless piece of shit.
Joseph's face fell, confusion muddling his features. Please, I don't know what you mean, he stuttered. I tried to listen to your confession. I wanted to help you. You chose not to go down that path. I don't know what else you expected me to do.
Is that what you think this is about, you senile old fool? You're stupider than I thought. You need to have a good think about who I am, Father, because I am the ghost of your past, come back to haunt you. Think about all those dirty, nasty secrets you have in your life, those creaking skeletons in your closet. I am one of those skeletons, one that you created, you and your twisted friend together.
Joseph looked like his head was about to explode, utter bewilderment plastered across it. You have to stop talking in riddles, he said. If you think I'm responsible for something, you're going to have to tell me what it is.
You know, Father, you just don't want to say, especially in front of your pig sister. But how about I give you a clue? Think back to the 80s, when you first started doing this crap you call work. Any memories from back then cast a shadow over that heartless soul of yours?
Charlotte watched Joseph closely, searching for any hint that he knew what Jack was referring to. So far, so good. Please, I don't know what you're talking about. Just tell me. Joseph's weary face was pleading, anxious to set things right.
Okay, I'll play your game,
Jack said, his voice cold.
In fact, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Let me take you back, Father, to the late 80s, when you shared a parish with Father Alan Watson. Ringing any bells yet?
Joseph nodded slowly, his face reddening in recognition. Charlotte's breath caught. It couldn't be true.
You might recall 2 altar boys back then, Ben and Johnny. Well, I am Johnny. All grown up now. See, that's a big problem with what you were doing back then. You forgot that the kids you molested would one day grow up.
Joseph hung his head, his shoulders slumping. Charlotte's heart was pounding. What was going on? Did Joseph know about this? Just who was this person she knew as her brother?
You destroyed my life, you dirty fucker. That's why I've decided to destroy yours, Jack said, emotion bubbling in his voice. You preyed on vulnerable, innocent young boys with your sickness, and week after week you tore pieces of my life away until I was left with nothing. All so you and your twisted mate could get your rocks off. You selfish fucking prick. You ruined my life. I hate you with everything I have, and I have made it my mission in life to hunt you down and make you pay for what you did.
Charlotte could sense Jack was almost in tears, his voice quivering as he spoke. This was clearly a moment he had been working towards for decades, an opportunity to speak out against his attacker, something most victims never got the chance to do. Against her wishes, she felt herself sympathizing with him. If what he was saying were true, the revulsion she held for her brother was beyond explanation. But the women, Joseph said shakily. Why? Why slaughter innocent people like that? What did they ever do to deserve that?
Deserve?
Jack shouted.
You think this is about what people deserve? Your mate, Father Watson, got what he deserved, and I can't say I'm sorry about that. But did you ever stop to think if I deserved what happened to me? I was a child. Those women played a huge part in bringing you to your knees. And judging from where we sit now, I'd say my mission is accomplished.
Wait, there's something you need to understand.
I understand perfectly!
Jack screamed, his voice reverberating off the church's stone walls. The police officers reacted to the outburst, all three drawing their firearms in anticipation, keeping them pointed low at the ground.
I'm the one who went through it, remember? You sit there all smug, still hiding behind your arrogance, and you dare to tell me I don't understand. It's you who doesn't understand, Father, and you never have. That's your problem.
The police maintained their position, too far away to hear the conversation, but close enough to act if they had to. Charlotte knew that with one of their own in such a precarious position, there was no way they wouldn't act if things spiraled out of control any further. If she were in J.D.'s position, she would rather die than let her partner down.
Can I ask you something?
Joseph said, his head down, his voice barely audible.
Why do you think it was me? Think?
Jack shot back angrily, grabbing Charlotte by her top and shaking her as he spoke.
There's no think about it. I know it was you.
Please, let me explain for 2 seconds, Joseph said, lifting his head.
It's not what you think,
I promise. You say I was involved, and as much as I hate to say it, I was, but not in the way you think. Jack's voice from behind Charlotte was contorted with rage.
Don't fuck with me, Father. You were there when it happened. That's something no words of yours can ever change.
I know I was there. I admit that, Joseph said, staring into Jack's face. His eyes reddened with tears. Is that what you want? An admission? Fine. You got it. Yes, I was there. But I didn't do anything to you boys back then, or any boys since. I know you won't believe me, but it's true. I swear on my sister's life.
Your sister's life?
Jack shook his head in frustration.
You want to promise me something on her life? Because that doesn't exactly mean much anymore, does it?
As he said the words, Jack grabbed Charlotte's wig and wrenched it from her head once more, revealing her stark, bald skin beneath. Joseph was clearly shocked by the sight and moved towards his sister.
Sit the fuck down,
Jack yelled, his arm slinging around Charlotte's neck in a headlock.
I swear I'll slice her right here in front of you.
Joseph froze, halfway to his feet, tears streaming down his face. Charlotte looked down at him from Jack's chokehold, panic and shame in her eyes, torn between the humiliation of her physical state and repulsion at what her brother might have done. "Charlotte, what's going on? Why didn't you tell me?" Joseph's voice caught on the last word, and he let out a long, loud sob of despair. Stuck where they were, meters apart, all Charlotte could do was look at Joseph and hope that he understood. Perched on the cold, slate-grey concrete steps of the church, in the hands of a killer, she realized it didn't matter how many crooks she'd caught, or how many cases she'd solved. All the avenged victims in the world meant nothing when all she wanted was to be held in the arms of someone who truly loved her. And now, all at once, she'd lost both Jack and Joseph.
"Forget about her,"
Jack said, regaining control of the situation.
"This is all your fault, Father. You are responsible for the way I am. My past is littered with unconsummated relationships. Women who, in the end, would rather be alone than with me. That's what happens when you're a freak. No woman can stand to be with me, not even your dear sister when she's at death's door. I want you to suffer like I had to, and seeing you sitting there, crying like a baby, trying to defend yourself and your actions, almost makes me feel satisfied. Almost."
Joseph looked at Jack, a steely resolve in his eyes. It was as if a fog had lifted. Maybe he had realized if his sister was facing death and her demons, he could too. "I admit, I did wrong," he said. "I was there. I did nothing to stop it, that's true and unforgivable. But I swear to you, I didn't touch you boys like that. Father Watson was a very powerful man in the church back then, and I was young and impressionable, like everyone else. I did what he told me to my own detriment. Yes, I was aware of what he was doing. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I would have been excommunicated from the church, and no one would have believed me anyway. Hell, no one even believes allegations like that now, let alone 30-odd years ago. I promise you, I never touched you or any other boy. Think back, please." "You were there every time I woke back up," Jack said, staying true to his convictions. "Every time you would get us dressed again, pretending like nothing had happened." "That's because I cared," Joseph cried, breaking down again. "I tried to help you, to lessen the impact, to be there for you when he had gone. He banished me from that room until it was over. To this day, I still don't know what went on in there. But I do know I tried to help you when I could. Meaningless, I know, but it was all I could think to do." "No," Jack said, but Charlotte felt a glimmer of hope at the hesitation in his voice, and she knew he was fighting against himself. "I know you were part of it. I'm sure. You're bullshitting me." "I'm not," Joseph said, moving a step closer. "You know it. I can feel it. You know I'm telling the truth. I was wrong. I admit that. But wrong by neglect, nothing else." "No!" Jack yelled, stopping Joseph from closing the gap any further. "It's not true!" In an instant his frustration boiled over and he finally cracked. Tossing Charlotte to one side, Jack lunged from the top step, the knife raised high above his head, poised to end Joseph's life and reclaim his own. Bang! 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 The shots rang out in quick succession in the night sky, cracking through the still air, orange flashes bursting out of the darkness. Jack's body crumpled, landing on the steps with a sickening thud. The bullets had ripped into his torso, and he was dead before he hit the ground. He rolled down to the bottom of the stairs, blood oozing from his wounds and pooling around him in a deep crimson arc. Charlotte ran to Joe and held him in a deep embrace, sister to brother. He squeezed her tightly, his tears splashing down onto her bare head like raindrops. At last, the nightmare was over. Chapter 42. Her secrets revealed, and her case closed. Charlotte knew she had to take some much-needed time off, not just to recuperate from her treatment, but to process everything that had happened. The following day, exhausted, nauseous, and still confused, she headed into the office one last time at Dash's request. She looked like shit and felt like it too. "Morning all," she said softly as she entered the squad room, forcing a smile. Her colleagues paused at their desks, a mob of meerkats studying the intrusion, some with eyes full of pity, some curious, some even with a hint of disgust. Word had obviously got around that the serial killer had been her boyfriend. "Think what you want, fuckers." She crossed the floor and rapped on Dash's office door. The memory of the last time she had entered this room made her grimace, and she hoped she wasn't about to walk in on anything untoward this time.
"Yep."
Her voice was full of authority and impatience. She opened the door.
"Ah, Charlotte, come in."
Dash sat at his desk, pen in hand, scribbling furiously on a document as she entered the room.
"It's been crazy around here, as you'd expect. Please, sit. How have you been?"
He got to his feet and stepped around the desk, reaching out to hug her awkwardly. Taken aback, Charlotte remained still, arms by her side like a wooden soldier, her cheeks reddening. Finally released, she sat, relieved. "I'm okay, I guess," she said, resting her hands on the edge of the desk. Then, recalling the last time she'd been in here, she shot them back into her lap, resisting the urge to reach for some sanitizer. "As well as could be expected, given the circumstances. I'll just collect some of my things and tidy up before I take off for a while."
Good, good,"
Dash said, averting his eyes.
"Don't get me wrong. I'll miss your professionalism round here, but we both know you need the break. Your health needs to be your main priority."
Charlotte nodded. "Just go easy on JD. He's the best you've got now I'm out of action."
"You're preaching to the choir,"
Dash said, rising from his chair and offering his hand, a much more fitting gesture.
"You look after yourself, Detective. Don't rush back, but when you're ready, your desk will be waiting."
"Thanks, boss," Charlotte replied, shaking his hand. "Where is JD, by the way? I need to say goodbye."
"In the soft interview room," Dash said. "Just cleaning things up with that Ben Willett."
After putting the cardboard box of personal items on the back seat of her car, Charlotte approached the interview room. Squinting, she pushed her face up against the door, her right eye against the peephole. The fisheye lens took in the entire room. The two men sat on opposite sides of a scuffed desk, one clearly distraught, his face blotchy with tears. JD sat before a computer, his fingers poised over the keyboard. After a short internal debate, Charlotte took the bull by the horns and opened the door. She poked her head into the room as both sets of eyes swung her way. "Sorry, Detective Darkin, could I borrow you for a minute?" Before JD could reply, Ben shook his head, his eyes moist, a half-baked smile emerging on his tired face. "I've seen this in the movies. Isn't this where you tell him some vital piece of evidence and suddenly I get arrested?" He sniffed, running the back of his hand across his nostrils. "I didn't do it, I swear." Charlotte grinned. "It's nothing like that. You're one of the good guys, aren't you?" Ben shrugged. "Who even knows what a good guy is these days?" They left him alone in the interview room, his eyes downcast, thumbnails flicking together. JD shut the door behind him. "Come here, you." He embraced her warmly, a genuine hug. "No bullshit now. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Charlotte said, rolling her eyes, but secretly thankful for his concern. "Why wouldn't I be? Cancer's got me by the throat. My boyfriend turned out to be a serial killer. And my priest brother might be a pedophile. Aside from that, everything's just dandy. J.D. leant back against the wall, shirt collar sweat-stained and loose, red tie already dangling, despite the early hour. It was more than likely he'd been up all night. "What's that old Meatloaf song?" he said, his eyes twinkling. 2 out of 3 ain't bad? What do you mean by that? I can't do much about your shitty disease, nor your taste in men. But I can give you some good news. There's no case against Joseph, Charlotte. I'm just about done taking Ben's statement in there, and there's barely enough to even interview your brother, let alone take him to court. J.D. took her by the shoulders, her eyes moistening as his words sunk in. With both Jack and Father Watson gone, and no statements from either, it looks like we're at the end of the road. As for Ben, his recollection of exactly what happened all those years ago is fuzzy at best, nowhere near enough for us to run with, particularly with a historical sexual assault like this one. We know that Joseph was there, but Ben can't actually confirm he did anything. And there's nothing at all that allows me to come to that conclusion. Listen, Joseph messed up. He could have said something. He should have said something. Morally, he's failed himself, the church, and especially those 2 little boys. But as I explained to Ben, it's not a crime to work with a pedophile, only to be one. Charlotte opened her mouth, but no words came out. You mean it's over? She finally mumbled, lips quivering. It's over, J.D. replied, embracing her a second time. Go home, partner. Relax. Catch up on some sleep. Make yourself better. You need a break, and God knows you deserve one. Don't worry. I'll hold the fort. He flexed his scrawny arms, extracting a stifled laugh from Charlotte. Promise? She said, wiping her eyes. Promise. Charlotte leant forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. Her eyes closed. See you soon. Waving behind her, she wandered down the hallway and left the building. No fanfare, no parade, no looking back. Epilogue. Joseph stood in the rain, the umbrella he had raised against the elements providing him little comfort. The drops thudded onto the material like bullets, pooling before dripping from the edge and splashing onto the muddy ground. The sky above was an ominous grey, murky and swirling, and like most people present, both angry and sad. Funerals always had a profound impact on him, whether he knew the deceased personally or not, and indeed, whether the departed was the most loved person in the community, or the most despised. Joseph had come to learn that even the most hated people were saints upon the time of their death. Even those who had dwelled in the murkier areas of society were treated like angels when the time came for them to meet their Maker. Maybe that's why, he thought. Perhaps we give the deceased the benefit of the doubt here on earth, because deep down we know they're going to get their comeuppance when they stand at the pearly gates, awaiting their fate. Their life laid out before them. Every funeral had a story to tell. Every life was a gift that had been extinguished, and the grief was real, regardless of the circumstances. Somehow, he had managed to hold himself together on this occasion out of respect and admiration. But it had been one of the most difficult days of his life. To be expected to preside over this funeral in particular was almost beyond him. Still, he had a job to do, and his pact with God ensured that he would work his way through it all somehow. In his line of work, refusal was not an option. The crowd was sizable without being massive. Strangers had travelled some distance to pay their respects, and Joseph watched the awkward exchanges between distant family members with curiosity, as always. In times of grief, they banded together as human beings, but it was inevitable that the scar tissue from previous encounters always lurked below the surface, never dissolving completely, even in times of intense sorrow. The service had been brief, and afterwards, Joseph had wandered among the crowd, a handshake here, a hug there. Condolences were traded, reassuring words of comfort shared by those still raw with grief, trying in vain to process their emotions. Death always threw up so many questions, but when it came so unexpectedly, the impact was even sharper. When so many unanswered queries hung over the extinguished life, when deep, personal secrets had been kept hidden from everyone, the wound their loss inflicted was even more excruciating. None more so than this. The congregation had followed the hearse on foot for the short walk to the nearby cemetery, a swarm of people packed together, umbrellas clashing every few steps. Joseph led the way, the hushed conversations of those who trailed behind him drowned out by the pattering of raindrops. And so it had come to this. Joseph now stood in drizzle at the gravesite, a large pile of freshly dug dirt softening beside him, waiting to be returned to where it belonged. Surrounded by people, Joseph felt the support that came with shared heartache, but still felt totally alone. Drawing in a deep breath, he perused the expectancy of faces, each hoping for a miracle he could not produce. "I thank you all for coming along to farewell, Charlotte," he began, the arm of his umbrella tucked under his elbow as the wind buffeted. The mob of mourners around the gravesite moved closer together, a colony of penguins bunkering down against the onslaught. A few stood unprotected from the deluge, the rain running down their faces, mixing with the salt of their tears. The large police contingent was unmistakable, most of them in uniforms that sparkled in the frigid air, buttons polished and tunics pressed. They too had come to farewell one of their own, and were doing it in style. Immense pride welled in Joseph's constricting throat as he prepared to continue, every fibre of his being not wanting to complete what he knew he had to. 6 months was all it had taken. 180 days from that fateful night when Jack Talbot had taken them hostage. Since that haunting evening, Joseph himself had hardly slept. The recurring nightmares visiting him over and over, the putrid feeling of waking in a pool of sweat, now a common occurrence. But the reality was nothing compared to the effect that night had on Charlotte. His brave sister Charlotte, the person he adored more than anyone in the world. She had survived that evening's events relatively unscathed, or so it had seemed. But as the days and weeks had passed, she had begun to deteriorate, at first gradually, then with incredible swiftness, the beautiful woman she had been dissolving into what Joseph could only describe as a human skeleton, a living bag of bones. There was nothing he or anyone else could do. The cancer had resurfaced and metastasized in other areas of her body, including her bones, her lungs, and eventually her brain. Aggressive and unrelenting, it had drained every last drop of life from her body. He had been with her when she passed, holding her withered hand as she drew her last breath, and looked into his eyes for the final time. It was a nightmare he had yet to wake from, if indeed he ever would. "As the good Lord himself taught us," Joseph continued, his voice booming around the cemetery, "ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. And so it is that our sister Charlotte returns to the earth, her spirit again at one in heaven with God the Almighty. We are forced, albeit with heavy hearts, to bid her farewell, and remain thankful for every day that we were fortunate to have her in our lives. That little ray of sunshine in an all too often dark and desperate world. May we all carry her with us from this day forward." The coffin, a spectacular glossy dark brown with gold fittings, was lowered into the open ground. Several people broke down in the crowd, sobbing loudly. Joseph looked around, his hands clasped at his waist, and saw grown men, burly police officers who had seen the worst of humanity, blubbering like children, their faces screwed up, tears flowing freely. Many came forward, tossing white roses, as Charlotte had requested, which landed softly on the disappearing coffin. Finally, Detective Darkin knelt beside the grave, the last person to pay their respects. He murmured words too soft for anyone else to hear, as he tossed not a flower, but a handful of dirt into the hollow. Rising on unsteady legs, he was embraced by his colleagues and shepherded away. Having made their peace, the mourners turned, shuffling out of the cemetery gates in dribs and drabs. Joseph farewelled them all, once again hugging most and shaking their hands, until only he and the two altar boys remained. They had been with him throughout the service and the burial, tending to his every requirement, walking alongside him as they had led the short procession from the church down to the cemetery. Now, the three of them made the return trip alone, Joseph towering over his two companions as they strolled along, the silence broken only by the swishing of their robes. Within minutes, they arrived at the church, their clothing drenched. Joseph led them into his chambers, the moisture squelching in their shoes with every step they took. Muddy footprints accompanied them. He paused in the doorway, gesturing his two helpers inside, into the warmth and comfort within. "Thank you, boys," he said quietly, kneeling down and hugging them both. "I appreciate everything you have done for me today. And I know my sister would have too. It really means a lot." The youngsters nodded solemnly, their eyes downcast. "Now, let's get these clothes off before we catch the death of cold." As the boys began to disrobe, Joseph rose and walked to the door. Quietly, and without conscience, he nudged it shut, sliding the lock into place. Turning, he opened the cabinet just inside the doorway and withdrew the decanter and 3 glasses, which clinked together as he placed them onto the waiting coffee table. "Anyone for a drink?" You've been listening to The Devil Inside by D.L. Hicks, narrated by Rick Herbert, published by Wavesound Audiobooks, an imprint of W.F. Howes Limited. This work is copyrighted D.L. Hicks 2020. This recording is copyrighted 2020 W.F. Howes Limited.